Climate change is an issue that affects all of us, or at least it should be something that all of us are thinking about. But some people in the world are more vulnerable than others. The island republic of Kiribati, a collection of tiny islands in the Pacific Ocean, is very vulnerable to climate change. Joining us, the former president of that republic, Anote Tong. Sir, thank you very much for joining us today. You have come here to Bengaluru for an environmental festival, and you have been trying to spread the message that this is an emergency. What message are you trying to give to world leaders?
Well, let me first of all thank you for this opportunity to tell this story, a story that I've been telling over more than a decade of my term in office. And of course, I'm out of office now. I used to be the president until beginning of 2016. But it's climate change is a story that needs to be told, no matter whether you think you're so vulnerable or not. Because what is important to understand is that the level of vulnerability will vary from the highest level to the lowest level. And for countries like mine,
yes,
which are barely 2 meters above sea level on average, any marginal rise in sea level is really disastrous. But I think I want to make the point that so far our experience has not been the sea level rise, but has been the more likely to be the more immediate danger would be the changes in the weather pattern. We don't get cyclones,
yes, okay,
because we're on the equator, but we are beginning to have that. And so our experience of 2015, where we got hit by a cyclone,
yes,
for the first time, that is scary. And so our people are beginning to be concerned.
Absolutely. And you have traveled around. Are you concerned when people like, say, Donald Trump of the United States does not seem to respond to the urgency?
Well, I think everybody was disappointed by the position that the new U.S. administration took. Extremely disappointing after the leadership that President Obama did in Paris at 2015. And so whether that's driven by compassion for the countries or simply by a focus on what it is good for just America itself, it is disappointing. But at the same time, I want to make the point that the recent conference that I attended in New York at the United Nations Ocean Conference, I was there with leaders from different states who made a very categorical statement that no matter where the administration is going, they remain committed to the commitments they made in Paris. So that is heartening indeed.
That does give some rise for optimism there.
Absolutely. So I think there is more than hope. I think there is, I think what Donald Trump may be saying does not reflect what the rest of the United States may be thinking.
Your nearest big neighbor, Australia, you must have interacted with them also on this issue. What is the response from there?
Well, again, it relates to a comment that I've often made, and this is that the unfortunate reality that quite often an issue like climate change becomes a political football. Okay. And so whenever there is a change in government, as had been the case in Australia, when the former Labour government was in office, climate change was at the top of the agenda. Then when the new government, the new administration came in, it's become a non-issue. And we are seeing this in the United States, exactly. And so Australia now, with the current government, was initially very much against climate change. But I think I can see a change. And I think for us, it's a healthy change of attitude. But I think it's a realization that it's not about today that we should be looking at. It's not simply about ourselves that we should be considering. We should look beyond our national borders, the impact of what we do. Because what we do within our borders, and I think this is the point that I've made to some of my lead colleagues in the region, that unfortunately, if you could retain your emissions within your national borders, then I have no problem. But unfortunately, you cannot. And so I think we've got to realize that whatever we do in our different parts of the world has implications for people on the other side of the world.
Absolutely. Why is Kiribati so vulnerable?
As I explained before, we are very small, tiny atolls on top of the seamounts. Atolls are, by their very geography, are narrow strips of land, very low-lying, and therefore fragile even with the normal state of events. But as we see the changes we are experiencing now, and when you made the comment earlier that for us it is an emergency, because it's not about an event that might happen in the future. Things are happening which did not happen before. And I've always been careful not to say that climate change is happening, that the sea level is rising, because I cannot see it rise. But what I can see and what I can say with absolute conviction from evidence that I see with my own eyes in different communities that I visit, is there are things happening.
Okay.
People are being dislocated. A lot of things, food crops are dying. Quite often the water lens, we take our water from the underground. They're being contaminated. Okay. And so that is affecting life.
So it's not necessarily about the water levels rising, but other impact of climate change, which you feel is perhaps...
Yes, it's the higher energy, I think. And so I think this is happening all over the world. We're seeing storms taking greater frequency, storms much more, gaining more strength than they'd ever did. And so what happened in 2015 was the cyclone that hit the island of Vanuatu, this is way down south. It came around back and hit our islands. It flooded all of the islands of Tuvalu, which are they're further south to us, and hit our southernmost islands. So it destroyed homes and flooded the rest of the islands to the extent that a lot of food crops were destroyed. Now, if that was to happen with more frequency and with more strength, then we're in deep, deep trouble.
Absolutely. How would you assess India's position on this? Are you hopeful that India is really on board with efforts to combat this kind of climate change?
Let me share with you my own experience. This is not the first time that I've traveled to India. Following the Cancun meeting in 2009, I came to India in 2010 to speak at the Terry Institute in New Delhi. At the invitation of then the chair of the IPCC, Dr. Pachauri. And I came with mixed feelings, knowing the position that India took in Copenhagen. But what was so inspiring was the statement by the Prime Minister that India was committed to taking its share of the responsibility and doing what it needs to be done. And so I've seen that change over the years. And India is not India of the 2005, 2006. It's an India that's forward-looking, an India that is contributing to addressing the issue. And so when the United States withdrew, I wondered whether China, whether India, who had always been dragging their feet on this issue, would find a good excuse to withdraw. And so to see India and China come in with full commitment was extremely inspiring. And I think it's, for me, it really gave me a lot of hope that we do have a future.
That is wonderful. Now, this passion that you have for climate change, was it always there, or was it during your term as president that you really realized, I need to do this, I need to be the change that I want to see also?
Let me say that I never really read into too much of the reports of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. But when I came into office, I started reading it. And then I wondered what it is that I would say at the United Nations General Assembly that would have relevance at the international level. Because the focus then was on terrorism, it was on the world trade, it was on issues like that, the financial crisis, what have you. And having read the reports, I could, without hesitation, identify climate change as the one that's relevant to us, because we are extremely vulnerable, and also because there is nothing much that we can do about it, but it's something that we need to put on the global stage.
Yes, it is something that is being done to you.
Absolutely.
Yes, I'm sure your population of 100,000 is not really contributing much to global warming and to the carbon footprint. So it's really something which you are bearing because of what other people are doing.
Yes, it's unfortunately that is the case. And if people would bother to follow my statements at the General Assembly, my early statements were that. Very frustrated, very angry. And so I was trying to get some people to listen to what I was saying. And it took a long time for that, for me, for the message to be heard. But I'm so glad that the situation is very different today. Everybody, every leader is talking about climate change at the General Assembly. And it's, what happened in Paris was really a landmark achievement.
So you are a little more optimistic that the world leaders are listening a little bit more?
Yes, they are listening and they are talking, but I'm still waiting for action.
Waiting for action, yes.
Okay, because even the Paris Agreement does not have the prescription for addressing the problem that we will continue to face regardless of what levels of emission we are emitting, whether we're going for 1.5 degree rise in temperature or even 0. According to the IPCC reports, what's already in the atmosphere will continue to ensure that the momentum will ensure that our islands will be affected seriously. So there's got to be more credible, concrete solutions, which I've been looking for that I could take back to my people and say, here you are. You are guaranteed a future. Up to now, that remains unaddressed.
It hasn't been addressed yet. You'd spoken of your frustration when leaders do not seem to hear what to you is so obvious. How do you deal with that?
Well, it took me a long time. I got very depressed, but I think I had to find a new energy. And the energy was understanding that there is no point trying to tell my people of what it is in store for them for the future, because there is nothing they can do about it. And for me to say that, to admit that there is nothing I can do about it, that's beyond my control, was not good enough. And it's unbecoming, and I didn't deserve a leadership role. To give an answer like that, I think I would have failed my duty to my people.
So your fight continues.
I had to find solutions, create solutions, even the craziest sounding solutions, like trying to find whether we can live on floating islands. And so I've looked at that, and so it had to be that. Extreme measures. Extreme measures, because we are facing extreme difficulties, unprecedented. And so, in the absence of any answer, we've got to consider every possible option, even the crazy option. But of course, what always encourages me is that here we are talking about building islands, and I've actually tried to partner with the United Arab Emirates, who have built islands, and they have come to visit, they have done studies, and so I believe they were interested, they've got the technology, they've got the experience. But I think what always encourages me is the fact that people like Richard Branson and Elon Musk are thinking about building hotels in space, So we should be able to do something to ensure the survival of people like mine.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. Anote Tong, former president of the Republic of the Kiribati, one of the most vulnerable parts of the world when it comes to climate change and global warming. And he is on a global campaign of his own to make sure that people listen and do something about all this. With J.M. Kumar, Maya Sharma in Bengaluru for NDTV.